Welcome to a short Path of Exile 2 Early Access first impression. I'll continue playing the game and finish Early Access with 2 characters to do a full review, but I'm swamped with games at the moment, so who knows when that's gonna happen. Instead, here is a first impression after reaching somewhere around the middle of Act 2. Before we go into this short Early Access impression video, you repetitive bastards need to understand that I despise Diablo-esque genre. To me it's one of the worst gaming genres at the moment, so by default almost none of the games are actually good, because the genre itself is the definition of mediocrity. However, I'll try to be as fair as possible in assessing every game, including Diablo-esque ones. Let's start with the story. If I recall correctly, correct me if I'm wrong cause my memory is terrible, Path of Exile 1 had a good lore and story. They've built a world with some background. Path of Exile 2 story is very generic and familiar. Starts off interesting, but then it's typical corruption this, corruption that, powerful people destroyed by the corruption and then ruined the land. There is more to environmental storytelling that can fill in the gaps, but overall so far it's too generic. Hopefully it builds more towards the end of the early access. To conclude, the story so far is average. Serves the purpose, but hasn't got enough to it at this moment to connect the player, the goal and the world in a significant way. Maps are on the other hand well done. They are typical Diablo-esque genre types, so nothing new, but it's more about the details. As mentioned earlier, there is some environmental storytelling that helps maps stand out next to high attention to detail. Overall, nicely done. One thing I don't like is that every Diablo and now Path of Exile have to have the same terrain types for chapters as the games before. Lo and behold, the first act is some kind of a village type darker map. Second act is, you guessed it, a desert. It can be exciting in games like this to see where the path takes us next with the new terrains, enemies and stories, but when it's predictable then it takes away from it. Gameplay-wise, Path of Exile 2 from this short 16-hour experience is good. Playing one hand and shield warrior, and have to say combat is quite engaging. Lots of impact on almost every action, although there are missteps like no enemy reactions when getting hit at times and enemies moving the character so that the character just slides, which looks cheap, but other than that, very nicely done. Small changes like shields being usable manually is a big thing in creating a more engaging experience. Offers a different tactical approach so that it's not just any ability spam. 2 weapon sets that can be changed automatically adds a lot of variety to the gameplay dynamic. Having a crossbow as the secondary weapon helped me tremendously in some of the tougher fights where I had to apply different strategies. Warrior abilities focus around high stun in order to crowd control the battlefield. Sequential use of abilities in order to maximize the effectiveness is nicely done for warriors at least. I've utilized Shield Charge, Rolling Slam, Firewall, Totem, Earthquake, Infernal Cry and Bone Shatterer. Lots of basic attacks too. Thing is, even with all the abilities I had to watch my movements and positioning to not die. Act 1 forgives a lot, but Act 2 doesn't allow mistakes, so even the tanky warrior needs to hit and move and block when possible. It's a very engaging way to play that I like a lot. Enemy variety is quite good too, but the more important thing is their attacks, especially rare monsters and bosses. It's not just a special aura or something, but the way enemies move and mix their attacks makes for a more interesting combat. Basic enemies have only 1 or 2 basic attacks, which is fine, but then the more dangerous enemy, the more attack variety there is. Enemy group setups are nicely done too, mages with a bunch of trash mobs, hulks with faster moving bastards, ranged mixed with a bunch of melee and so on. For me the game didn't overstay its welcome with the same monsters and monster groups, it changed things up frequently. Best experiences were definitely against the bosses. Damn, they are tough, and also incredibly well done, outside of a few attacks here and there that can burst the player down too quickly. Each boss truly feels unique and will challenge the player in a different way due to the arsenal of attacks that they possess. These fights end up being as much skill based as they are build based. I really like that. Early access is quite difficult and for the most part I like it a lot. Being able to blow up bosses without having any challenge up to the end game is such a stupid, mind-numbingly boring design that is done in a lot of the games in this mediocre genre. But Path of Exile 2 went a different way. You want to progress? Fine, you're gonna have to work for it by becoming better. Most bosses I had to try 4 or 5 times, which is great because it would force me to hone my skills by mixing things better, reading the moves, listening to audio cues for the upcoming attack type, add or modify a few things for the build. And everything helped. However, cheap deaths become more frequent as the game progresses. Suddenly, even tanky characters get blown up by a few normal mobs in a few hits, which is ridiculous. Difficult to play around as well due to the amount of enemies blocking the player's path on each side. Especially the ranged enemies seem to be out of balance, as they can do ridiculous damage at times. As I said, I love a proper challenge, and in my short experience it's there, but needs more balancing to negate some of the cheap instant blow-up deaths. To be honest, I prefer way more a game that is challenging from start to finish through the story, and the finish is actually a story finish, not the start of a damn endgame repetition. I can't stand endgame stuff in Diablo-esque games, and yeah, I've played Path of Exile endgame, even did the beginner's guide for Faxter Life for the original. Always thought the endgame in these games is just shit juggling to serve the purpose of a build simulator. One of the bigger issues that I had with early access is unrewarding loot. Magic chest off the beaten path guarded by a nasty group of monsters. Reward 2 gold pieces. What the fuck? Terrible. It's so frequent as well. I thought drops weren't good enough when it comes to rarity and gold. Orbs on the other hand have a decent drop rate. It's interesting the way Path of Exile does RNG with orbs that give players more ways to offset the RNG, but on the other hand orbs work through RNG as well. Why not allow the player to just choose the modifiers themselves? Would make orbs far more worthwhile and exciting. In the end, it's just RNG on top of RNG. Great idea with the orbs, but having them as RNG too is just an artificial way of prolonging game time. Hard to judge now the whole system because I want to experience the full game when it releases to know more. And also this idiotic outdated inventory design that limits the pickups so much and slows down the progression. But the nostalgia. Fuck the nostalgia. Go drink water from a dirty creek because of nostalgia since people did it before. Not everything gold is good. Not gonna waste any time talking about character progression tree because Path of Exile is fantastic in that regard. Too early to tell how balanced it is and how deep it goes, but it seems deep as heck. Don't have any doubt that it's going to be fantastic in early access and final version. I'm just wondering where the hell are all the melee weapons at? Only mace and quarterstaff from what I've seen. Swords, axes, scythes, daggers, where you at? I guess it's gonna come later. Graphically game looks good but needs more polish for the final release. I'm playing on PlayStation 5 and thankfully there are options to adjust the experience to my liking, but sometimes it does slow down a bit too much. Default look is also way too grainy, bloomy, whatever. Thankfully upscaling the game with FSR removes the grainy look and the game looks better then. Little muddy, maybe due to motion blur, but still better than the default. Launch was pretty smooth for such a big game. Yeah, delays, disconnects, whatever. Early access game, millions of players, and I could play through the weekend with almost no issues except the occasional disconnect and server slowdown. I say good job. Overall, Path of Exile 2 seems very promising. I'm interested to see where the early access and the new character take me and how it plays out later. Lots of good things, some bad stuff and some mediocrity, but for such a crappy genre the game does things alright. Full early access review coming at a much later date. Just don't know about the early access price. Why is it paid if the full game is free? Weird, right? Not know, you tell me. Anyway, thanks for watching, description for Patreon, subscribe, star merch, blah blah blah. See you soon.